Hey, welcome to another episode of the BetterBots podcast. In this episode, we're talking with Mike Bird of Open Interpreter. Open Interpreter is this insanely cool open source natural language AI project that's designed to let you have a natural language interface with your computer. They did a really cool demo the other week on their open house party on Discord where they have over 10,000 members already in their community. They have hundreds of contributors on GitHub. And again, like I said, it's open source. So this thing is really cool and their roadmap is super impressive. So check out any of the links to any of the resources that we talk about in the conversation. Check them out in the description below. Otherwise, enjoy the conversation. First of all, let's just do a quick overview of exactly what you guys are doing with Open Interpreter and, how you guys got there. But let's just start with who you are and where you're working at and a little description about that.
Love it. So I'm Mike Bird. I am the technical community manager at Open Interpreter, hire number 2. What Open Interpreter is it's this open source project to allow LLMs to run code. So it equips an LLM with a toolkit so it's able to actually write and execute code on your machine, giving you a lot of predictable, granular control. So the way I've kind of tried, like the analogy I use is the LLM's the brain. It does the reasoning, the logic, and Open Interpreter is the nervous system where it actually takes those signals and puts it out into actionable processes.
Yeah, man. And one really cool nerdy analogy that I think Killian referenced was basically computer from Star Trek, where you can just talk to the computer and it just knows everything that it needs to do. So if it needs to read a sensor on the ship, if it needs to engage, a certain navigation system, there's no particular instructions you have to do. All you have to do is ask the question and the computer gives you the answer. And one of the really cool demos that you guys did that I was like, that really made it stick in my mind was when Killian basically just talked into his little, O1 device and said, hey, send a Slack message to Mike asking for the status update on whatever. And that alone, when it was just like, okay, the message is sent and I could actually see the command happen in a perfect sequence of reasoning, I was like, oh, okay, I got to talk to these guys.
Yeah. It's borderline magic. And one thing about that particular demo that was super interesting about like the O1 project and Open Interpreter in general is a lot of the times LLMs can have a bit of unpredictability to them, but with teach mode, which is something we've incorporated into Open Interpreter, you're actually able to walk through it step by step to get more predictable outcome. So you'll just say, I want to teach you a new skill. And then you name the skill, go through step by step, and it asks for validation. Did I do it correctly? And if you give like an affirmative response, it ends up writing it to a file and it can reference that file later. So if you want to teach it how to use much more complex software than it can do right out of the box, you can just teach it and you'll have the skill. And maybe down the road, we're working on something where people can actually share these skills with each other. So we can collaboratively come together to take this open source project and make it incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, beyond just the features of itself, the fact that it's open source was another factor that I was like, yeah, this is going to grow insanely high because the biggest thing, and it's funny that, I'm getting to talk to you guys about this because a little background on me, some of our listeners know, some don't. The first startup that I had was Capri AI, and we're still running it today. But the biggest concept was that chatbots are only useful if you don't need them to do anything. If you need all the knowledge they have to be locally in the model itself, then a chatbot is perfectly good. The use cases of that are slim and far and few in between. But when you need it to actually have application utility in real world, it has to be able to have tooling. It has to be able to access things. So for us, the use case was we needed to be able to read a calendar. We needed to be able to read a schedule and get real-time availability so that when it's talking to somebody and they want to have an appointment, it's able to actually read that calendar. So now we're taking that and we're just blowing it up basically into this, entire tool set where there's less explicit instructions around each tool and more so understanding around what a tool's purpose is in a sequence. So I'm really curious, just if we can kind of step back for a second though, and just kind of go over like, where did the origins of this come from? Like, what was the fundamental idea that really led into this becoming such a big open source project? Would you guys have how many contributors now?
Yeah, I think we're at 110 now. So it's definitely ballooned. Our Discord's almost 10,000. 50,000. Have we hit 50,000 GitHub stars? By the time this goes out, we're probably at 50,000. So
Yeah.
back in September, Killian put out the project initially as the open source alternative to OpenAI's code interpreter. We wanted to get around he wanted to get around things such as the file size limit, the fact that it's online, OpenAI's policies around different content. So by being able to pull it locally, we circumvent a lot of that. Plus, you had direct internet access, which at the time OpenAI didn't have with their code interpreter. But it's evolved over time to just become the natural language interface to your computer, where similar to what you said, like it abstracts away the tools where you can just say, I want to do X, like I want to send an email to whoever. And you don't have to learn the programs because Open Interpreter has an innate understanding of how to operate your computer. Plus, it's tenacious where if it makes a mistake, the errors get fed back into it and it iterates again. So it might take a couple tries, but Open Interpreter will teach itself how to actually execute what you want it to do. So all of a sudden, you have people who are like traditionally unable to use a computer, whether it's because of some disability or just like a lack of understanding. And then they can completely go back into like their natural way of interfacing with the world, but be able to leverage the power of a computer. So it's been really cool seeing this transition, how it went from just like a relatively confined space of functionality to like this widely vast range of capabilities. And then introducing things like we have the O1 device, the little hardware thing we released. And now you can bring it with you anywhere you go. As long as the internet connection, you can control your computer. You can think of it as like giving instructions to a smart person sitting at your computer. And it's just evolved over the past, it hasn't even been a year yet. And it's just continually evolving into this open source powerhouse that's enabling a lot of cool use cases.
Yeah. And well, the thing that just screams out to me as an insane innovation with this particularly is the fact that it is machine interface. So fundamentally, it's running code on your computer, right? And that code is what executes the applications on your computer. So now you have an orchestration system, a very core, and you guys actually just went over it. And I love how open source this is, dude. It's so crazy. We just went over it on the house party that you guys had, which you guys do that once a month, right?
First
every
Thursday
month?
of every month.
First Thursday of every month on Discord. It was insane. It was really cool. Killian, the founder, literally walked through some of the code with us and showed what the repository is, how you can get started with it. So it's not just like here's a package, we think it's pretty cool, good luck. It was like there was actually community support around it. And there's some insane, like that Two Dog Seed showing these insane shortcuts on his iPad that all uses natural language tooling, just like it's insane. And so there's really a couple things that stood out to me. One is with this just being a human natural language machine interface type of system, it's really any type of machine. And I've been saying for a long time, like once ChatGPT came out, I made this prediction where the first thing is going to be this chatbot phase, right? Where it's like people need to understand that they can talk to it like a person. It does have almost human level understanding of natural language. So the first phase after that is going to be application, where it's like, how do we integrate it with the things that we use, like calendars, like file systems, anything that we can connect it to in a machine, it'll understand the tooling in a natural language way. And so that's where we're at right now. And another big popular open source project that did this was LangChain. LangChain is a really big Python package that's being used, and they just got hundreds of millions in funding now, because they're so well built for these kind of business to business applications and web interfaces. The next kind of hurdle that we have to get through is really voice, and everybody that does anything with real-time voice knows that there's still a long way to go before it's like truly human-like and intuitive in a way that you can really use it. But then once that hurdle is really complete, and you guys showed some really cool stuff with that at the house party as well, with just like the support for the voice integration and making it as a core piece of the system. But once that's really filled in, then you have this robotics application where now if you have a natural language interface with an agent tool set like this, any tool set that has a fixed set of code, right? Any machine has a fixed set of code with if it's a robot, there's a code set to make the arm move. If there's, a car, there's a certain set of code that does that. So it's like every machine set needs this type of interface. This is the operating system. It's the natural language operating system for these types of machine applications where it really needs a human to machine interface that's not typing. Like it's a whole paradigm shift. And that's why I texted you right after the house party on Twitter. I was like, dude, we're not going to recognize computers in 5-10 years. And it's going to be because of this kind of stuff where there's a new type of operating system that simply requires you to talk to it and you just get what you need and nothing else. I do wonder what it's going to look like in, a few years. And if you guys have thought of anything like that, where you can kind of package this and be more than consumer type of electronic device, but also like an industrial type of machine where it can have other applications besides consumer.
Yeah. There is one really unique business case. I shouldn't even say unique. It was just like a very logical application of OpenInterpreter where they simply took a spreadsheet, like human readable. You don't need to be technical. Everyone knows how to work with a spreadsheet, a list of instructions for how to accomplish certain tasks. And OpenInterpreter would execute it one row at a time. So you're able to collaboratively get different departments together to be like, how can we do this process? And because it's just plain text, anyone can go in and be like, it actually did this wrong. I'd prefer it formatted this way. And they can update it, which is really cool. But to kind of pull it back to like where the direction of where things are going, one area that we're going to explore as well is like preemptive prompting, where instead of relying on the human to initiate all of the interactions with it, what if the AI was like, hey, based upon your past behavior, this is something I suggest we start initiating. You've missed this meeting 3 times in a row. Should we cancel it, remove from the calendar, reach out to the host? Where you will not have to be the entire cognitive load and just like offload into assistant. You'll actually be able to like have a partner interacting to accomplish your goals. And then like the embodiment in robotics is super interesting. We actually had one demo that someone in our community put up a little while ago where they just had a webcam shining down on a component, like a chip. And they're like, what is this? Help me program it. And it was like, this is an ESP32. Let's open up Arduino IDE. Like, here's some code. And they made a light blink. And it was just OpenInterpreter via a camera. I think it was GPT-4 Vision at the time. And it was just like, there are so many use cases that are just out of our like the core team's creativity that we leverage the community for. And being such a general, like Swiss Army knife of a digital tool, it's really interesting seeing how people are applying it. And it's only going to become more capable as the community gets more involved and just like unlocks their creativity.
Dude, I literally just got chills. Like
it's exciting, man. I love it.
So like it is crazy because I've been working with like natural language for a few years now. Like I started back in like 2019 working just with Dialogflow and basic chatbots. And the feedback I got from so many people, especially very successful people that I would bring this to and show them the potential, is it's a dream. Like that was really, really common feedback for me. It was like, listen, it is theoretically possible to do what you're talking about. It is theoretically going to be really cool to have chatbots that are really intelligent, but it's just not reality right now. So that was always the feedback that I got. And now, the biggest thing that I didn't even necessarily realize, but it's coming to fruition now, is the LLMs really led to this agent structure, right? Like the natural language agent has become kind of the dominant format that everything is coming to an actual utility standpoint, because people are right. Like just a foundational language model that can chat with you in a human-like way, the use cases for that are very limited. But what we're seeing now is that language really is just the foundational tool that leads to actions, right? Because reasoning can be put within a language, and then that reasoning can lead to intelligent decisions. And that's where we're seeing this agential.
I say agentic.
Agentic. I like that. It's cool. But yeah, so like an agent focused application spree, like that's kind of what we're seeing now, is like, if I can give natural language instructions in such a way that it understands the tool set it has available to it, now I can actually create complex systems that require way less input, because I don't have to write all of these individual queries. I don't have to write all these individual rules and everything that has to happen. Instead, it just has the full understanding in almost the same way that I do or an assistant does, and it can just do it for me. That's really exciting. And like I said, I really see it as an operating system. Like you guys are genuinely developing, and like the same way that Android was an open source operating system, for non-Apple devices, basically. Like that's the way I see this, is like a natural language operating system for physical devices, and also just anything that's, really tool set focused. So that's really cool. The other part of it that somebody was talking about is this application into glasses and this application into like real world vision and being able to connect your agent to smart glasses. I have them written down. I just have to go find them, but it's this glasses that are open source, Brilliant Labs. I think you talked about it, brilliant.xyz.
Yeah, the frame.
Okay. So that's the frame, and it has a camera installed with it, and it's got like an open source system with it that you can modify and connect to whatever you want.
Yeah, I pre-ordered it, still haven't got it yet. So no hands-on experience, but the guys over at Brilliant are really cool. They have like the right mindset how to approach this. But yeah, the ideal, when I get it, the ideal experiment will be what can you do when you not only have like the text input, like Open Interpreter does handle images really well, but doesn't have like a live video feed. And actually, one thing I wanted to touch on that has been a really cool development because just today, or June 18th, we released the Local 3 update. And one thing we've incorporated is this small vision model called Moondream, made by a guy Vic out in Seattle. I love Moondream. It's really small, but like highly performant for its size. We've incorporated that in Open Interpreter. So if you use a local non-vision model for processing, like as the brain of your interpreter, what it'll do is it'll take an image, describe that image, and Moondream's really good at describing it, and then pass a description along to the text-only LLM. So even if you don't have access to a GPT-4 vision, you're still able to get some benefits from the vision side of things thanks to Moondream. So just like this proliferation of small open source models, like well orchestrated coming together to accomplish a goal, is really going to unlock some capabilities. Yeah. And to address one of the points you brought up before, like we're still at like the dial-up days of AI. Like it's still very slow token rates. Like it's early, but we just approach it from like the chatbot style. But we're starting to see more models trained on actually like agent traces and different ways of having like the LLM gain innate knowledge of a multi-step process. So instead of having to like reason its way through, it'll actually be tuned to be able to do these like complex tasks in a computer. So the fact that we're able to accomplish what we are, and I highly encourage you to check out Killian's demo he put out today, where he actually dragged in some training data and had Open Interpreter set up a script to train a model to identify tuberculosis in your lungs. Amazing stuff.
Wow.
And this is still the dial-up days. Like it is going to exponentially increase in capabilities over the next however long to AGI, couple of years.
That's so funny because I literally heard, I think it was Friedberg from the All In podcast. He just said that exact thing. Like we are still in the dial-up days, and they were talking about like the overall investment that's being made, and the cost of the systems to implement it versus the benefit people are getting in it so far. Like it all matches up with dial-up, where it was insanely expensive, very technical, very difficult to set it up. But once you did, you unlocked things that were not possible. Like, that was one of my earliest mentors, was one of the earliest people working in EDI when it was even becoming a thing where you have like electronic server to server communication, specifically for like accounting and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, we made millions and millions of dollars just knowing how to connect this kind of stuff, until eventually it all became standardized. And now you don't have to have such, specialty. You can have off the shelf type of solutions. But, and that's where I do see this at. And that's where I'm wondering, like, since we are in the dial-up days right now, if we take it back to like what I was saying with it being an operating system, like if you look at what an operating system is, and maybe this will kind of help some of the people who are not quite as technical listening to this, who are just wondering, like, why are these language models such a big deal? Why does it matter that we're having agents? Like you can connect it to your computer. That's cool. But what is this really doing? So think about an operating system at its base, right? You have the core components of like, it needs to be able to access the phone's like phone system, the SMS system. And if it has a camera, it needs to be able to take pictures, right? But then let's say you wanted to be able to connect to your email. You wanted to be able to connect to your Facebook and social medias. You want it to be able to do all of these different applications on the phone. You need a more advanced operating system that knows how to connect inputs and outputs and be able to do more complex things on the device, so that you get a better experience and you can do things easier. Because, before applications, a lot of people don't remember, if you want to do anything on the internet on your phone, you had to go on the phone's browser. And it was terrible.
It was awful.
It was so slow, barely worked. But then now, there's an app for everything. And if not, the web interface a lot of times is optimized for mobile. And that's really where I see this language model interface type of operating system coming, where it's just like, things like Open Interpreter are going to make it so that there's an easy to plug and play interface with a natural language where you don't have to do so much of the prompting. All you have to do is plug into the infrastructure, almost like Android, and then optimize the device. You know, if you have a device that you know is going to run this type of model, spend less on the interface, spend less on like the application user interface, and more on the actual natural language interface, where it's just really good at running text to speech models locally and speech to text models locally, and it's really good at doing tokenization locally. Like that's what I really see coming. And we saw a couple of devices that have come out so far, like, you know, the Rabbit R1 and the Humane Pin. And obviously they've gotten a lot of really harsh feedback. And I think that's to be expected when you have like the very first brick phones, remember, that were like this big and had a big antenna, or you had to have it plugged in.
20-minute battery life.
Yeah, like it was terrible, and people made fun of those people. But at the same time, a lot of people were like, "Oh shit, that person's got he could talk to somebody on the beach." Like, you know, there's like that was their commercial, and so yeah, I'm just curious, like within the hardware space specifically, where like, can you just talk a little bit about your next couple of years? Because I know you guys are working with some pretty big partners to get like a lot of AI credits, so that a lot of development can be done at a really low cost for you and your developer partners. So, you know, can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what some of the biggest projects you see with Open Interpreter are coming up are?
Yeah. So in terms of the hardware front, the transition from being just a software company doing both software and hardware is still in the experiment phase, where we want to see how the O1 Lite does in the community. And part of the reason we did it was we wanted to create the language model computer blueprint, where anyone is able to take and again, hardware is the same, all open source. So anyone's able to take the prototype and turn it into their own unique use case. Because for us, we wanted the ability to use Open Interpreter from anywhere in the world with an internet connection. That was like the driver. And then the reason we ended up with the O1 architecture and the development kit was we wanted to make it as cheap as possible, so as many people could just try it and see what would happen. And we wanted to be as accessible as possible. So we didn't want to get like really unique parts and anything that was like really hard to come by. The one that we're actually selling the consumer is going to have some pretty cool stuff in it. We're working with some firms to make it a very strong consumer product. But the developer kit right now, $50 in parts. You can put it yourself together in an afternoon. 3D print the case. It's really straightforward and easy because we wanted that lower barrier to entry. On the roadmap, if hardware proves to be viable, is going to be the O1 Heavy. So the goal for that is a fully self-contained unit where you don't need the internet connection. It'll have the model running locally. It's one of those things like you're out camping or something, and you need, but hey, there is this medical emergency we need to address now. If you can have the O1 Heavy to give you all the internet's information anywhere you are, all of a sudden it's going to like increase safety, increase capability. You imagine these can be like sent to different places, like remote communities that don't have consistent internet connection, although Starlink might be changing that. Just the ability to have full control, you know, set up some solar panels. All of a sudden you have like a doomsday device that can like keep you educated when everything collapses. So there's a lot of like unique aspects that you can pursue in the hardware front, but software is our bread and butter. And that's where we definitely see a lot of the potential, especially with like, we're releasing a desktop app soon, which will be targeted more towards general consumers rather than like the dev and coder centric of the current form of Open Interpreter. Because right now you can use it as a Python library, you can use it as a CLI tool, you can set the O1 server to use your hardware device. But a lot of people are like, I don't know what the terminal is. I don't like going through that way. So we're releasing a desktop app to give a natural language interface to anyone to use, fully cross-platform, Windows, Linux, Mac. So whatever you use, you'll be able to just tell your computer what to do. That's a big one. We're working more on trying to support the open source community in regards to agentic models, where instead of having to rely on OpenAI or the more performant ones that are like closed source behind a paywall, actually, Mistral's Codestral that just came out, super powerful. I've been so impressed with it. It's really cool. Llama 3 is good.
I've seen a lot of stuff on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Still haven't tested out NVIDIA's new model, but it's so big. It's one of those ones where it's like, I'm sure it'll have some value for like, you know, synthetic data creation. But in terms of like something that runs on your computer, there's still, it's not for like all consumer devices, but Codestral has been really cool. But we want to make sure we lower that barrier as much as possible. So if we can start building the ideal small form factor. It will really just like empower the community. And in this local release we just did, we've also included the ability for people to voluntarily opt in to contribute their conversations to help train this model. It's totally optional. There's no data collection by default. But if you want to help contribute to making this open source model a reality, you can, at the end of your conversation, OpenTurbo will say, hey, how'd it go? Be like, hey, it was good, or hey, it was bad. And then send a conversation along. We anonymize all the data, take out the PII, and then you'll contribute to this data set, which will eventually be able to make this open source model that's going to be able to power agents on your device in a very powerful way. So we're just trying to make it reduce the amount of reliance on external parties and have the control and the power on your device to control your data, stay private, stay local, and stay free.
Awesome. Yeah, your developer community seems amazing. And I really, really appreciate the fact that it's being built by developers who have a say, right? Because a lot of the controversy, especially with like OpenAI, starting out saying that it's going to be open. And then, of course, they got pretty close pretty quick. And there's just a lot of questions around their motivations and their partnerships with Microsoft and all this stuff. So having another option, even if it may not be majority of the market who has these concerns, but having another option that's available to people, that's what makes it so cool that it's being developed by developers as well. And speaking of that, like I was mentioning before, when we were on that house party, Two Dog Seed shared his screen. And if we can get a clip of that, I don't know if there's going to be a clip of that from Discord, if it was recorded or whatever, but I'll at least link to it. If not, put it right in here in this episode. He shared this crazy thing. What did he call it again?
The product he's coming out with is Farm Friend.
Farm
and there's more to it than that, but I'd say Farm Friend is how he'd like to frame it currently.
Right. Yeah. And it was this crazy, you don't even have to do anything to your iPad, right? It's just an app that you download, and then it uses Open Interpreter, natural language commands to do any of the code that's necessary to do. I mean, he was making like financial reports without even having to log. I mean, this is the craziest thing. When you got to do financial reports, you got to do quite a bit of analysis, right? Like you have to do a pretty good amount of research. You got to go find information, compile it, compare it, and then create it. Yeah. It did all of that by itself. He was just like, hey, create an analysis of this product and this stock performance and chart it out in this way. And then it just was like, okay, cool. And it just went and found everything that it needed. He didn't tell it like, this is where you're going to go find this. This is how you're going to compare this. It was just like, these are the things I need you to do. And then it went step by step through the tools that it had that it needed to do, past the input and output each one, and then created the full analysis. And I haven't seen anything that can do that independently, right? Like there's some things that are like, we have these pre-built integrations where, you can tell it to do operations on the data that are within our pre-built operations, but being able to just take anything from anywhere and put it into the system, like that's another level, dude. Like,
yeah,
that's so I'm making fun of Apple Intelligence.
Well, that's the thing. He came out with Apple Intelligence before they did, which I love to see. And what's really cool about that is, the house party was streamed. I can send you the link. And I know he put up some stuff on his Twitter as well, but a lot of it is just like the vast amount of shortcuts he made. He made very specific shortcuts that do certain things. Open Interpreter was even just a small component of that. Sometimes they would call it, but sometimes the way he had orchestrated it wouldn't even need it. But it just shows how you can take a system, plug in something like Open Interpreter, something that's open that you actually can work with, and it just enhances things. So he definitely would have had a very strong product regardless of the Open Interpreter aspect to it. But just the fact that you can put in this thing that can take language, process it, and then output code to make it more predictable and consistent is super exciting. But yeah, if you haven't checked out Farm Friend, definitely check out Two Dog. He's doing really cool things. He's just like a wizard with it. Yeah, he has a real life problem and solved it using technology. Not a developer by any means, just a guy who can grind.
That's crazy. He's not even what? What do you mean?
He's been around since the beginning. So September was launched, first house party. He came out. He was actually one of the first ones to get the OpenAI app that actually had the voice back and forth whenever that was released, I think in October. And he went on camera just to like give a little demo and whatnot. We're like, oh, this is cool. But yeah, he's been around from the beginning. And at the time he was like, I'm not a developer, but I'm just like interested in this, which is why he went the shortcut route, because with shortcuts, it abstracts away a lot of the coding. So if you just have in your head, like, the idea for how you want information to flow through your system, you can use tools like shortcuts to really take away like the intimidating programmatic nature of like coding an app, and you can unlock the same type of capabilities. So that's one cool thing with shortcuts. And with Open Interpreter, if you have a small script, like if you know some degree of coding, you just put a small Python script. Just by importing Open Interpreter, you just put intelligence into your script. So interpreter.chat pass in whatever you need to, and then you get the agentic control of your computer. So what we're trying to do is give the capability to as many people as possible. And because we know not everyone's a coder, we're just trying to abstract that away. So yeah, seeing things like Shortcut from Two Dogs that can just be approachable by non-technical people who just have like good problem solving skills is really exciting to see.
Yeah. And I can see it becoming like a crazy popular tool for the next generation of developers, like the next generation of people that are like, I really want to build this app for myself that, I can operate this way, and then have an agent that can just help you be that app. Basically, you don't have to go through anybody. Yeah, that's going to be nuts,
Yeah,
dude.
I foresee an appless future where you will have just like your core interface. Because like if you think about apps, the vast majority of them are just data in, data out with like a user experience that's like, designed from the app developer perspective in the most friendly way. But since everyone has different needs, different abilities, different ways of consuming information, if you had a unified interface that was optimized for you as the user, and that was what triggered the data in, data out from all these different applications, all of a sudden you can have like the optimized experience through your like single screen device that works with all these different APIs or general apps, depending on what you need. But yeah, what we use as a phone with apps now is going to be vastly different, way faster than people expect. Like you're saying, like computers are changing. It's going to be a device that is just like a person you talk to, except it has the entire internet worth of capabilities.
Yeah. The big thing about the open source structure of it too is like the consumer application side of it is what makes it the easiest to understand, right? Because like a lot of people, everybody has a phone, right? And everybody understands what it means to need to, the biggest thing is like being able to have a computer that you can just call like an agent. This has always been one of my visions too, is like if I'm out hiking, but I still have service, or if I'm not at home, but I need something to be done. One of the guys that works here at my office, actually, just the other day, I was like, I think it was Saturday, I was here with my daughter and I saw him come in. He was like, man, I had to come all the way here because there's this file on my computer and I need to send an email and I can't get it. And I literally thought of opening, I was like, man, that's literally what AI is for. Like you're supposed to be able to have like a phone number that is your assistant that you can just call and be like, hey, sorry, I left this file on my desktop. Can you please send it to where, that's where we're really headed. And Open Interpreter is going to be really applicable with that because it is, again, the operating system behind it. But then seeing it in like even hospitals, like I recently had to go to not me, but I had to go visit somebody in the hospital. And I realized there's so many devices that are within a hospital that are crucial to patient communication, to nurse and doctor communication, and so many very important things that require a lot of times several different interfaces. There's very archaic apps and systems that you have to put together to be able to even do one thing. A lot of it's still on paper. So just being able to have a natural interface where it's like you can ask questions about things that are going on in the machine that's connected to a person, or a machine, or a machine, like a machine
Yep.
connected to a machine. Like there's a lot of complex systems. So I
Yeah.
see that being a huge thing, and just all different industries that have those type of device requirements. There's going to need to be a transition of this type of agentic, focus.
Yeah, and AI medical care is super interesting to me. I have a background in medical science, and I just think there's so much upward potential. And I mean, like you have the ability now where vision models can pick out shades of gray that the human eye can't see for like analyzing X-rays and whatnot. But even on a more just like approachable level, because I personally don't trust AI, current state of AIs to be like diagnostic tools, but they can definitely help with data collection. Where if someone is waiting, a patient is waiting in the waiting room, if they were handed an iPad and it just was like, what are your symptoms? What's going on? And it was just able to ask a few questions back and forth. And then it could generate a little report for the doctor prior to being seen, prior to the patient being seen, being like, hey, by the way, keep your eyes open for this. Like, don't worry about this. I've already cleared it. And then all of a sudden, the doctor could spend more time like engaging with the patient, like lifestyle, and actually do like preventative care rather than strictly trying to diagnose, because the AI was able to take 80% of the guesswork away from it. And then the whatever half-hour visit with the patient could become 15 to 20 minutes. Doctors could see more patients, more people get healthcare, doctors make more money, which can be reinvested into more technology. Like there's definitely a flywheel effect where as long as there's a human in the loop, if AI is incorporated into medical science, it really can like expedite the way that we care for people. And that's near and dear to my heart. So I really hope
Yeah.
more people pick up that mission.
Yeah, and like I think that's been, I would say, collectively in society, that's kind of always been a dream, is to have the most advanced healthcare tech that we can have, right? Because then the patient success rate is, generally speaking, higher. But one of the things too is the fundamental truth of the cost of developing those types of technologies, and the amount of testing it has to go through to make sure that it's safe and stuff like that. And so one of the concerns with this type of new approach to it, where it's very, technology dependent in the diagnostic section, is like, are we going to have to reinvent a lot of these machines so that they now have this built into it at the center? It's the same reason, like with iPhone, Apple just announced their big partnership with ChatGPT, that they're not going to build like a whole new device that has like an onboard AI type of system. It's going to just mostly be the operating system has a native connection to ChatGPT's APIs, from what I understand. And that to me just kind of shows, like, it's so expensive right now, especially to like redesign a machine so that it's more focused on a different architecture than our normal just app focused interface. But having something like Open Interpreter that's more of a top layer integration system, where it's like, no, all you have to do is just kind of connect it, with the existing architecture, the existing code, because everything that's digital has to have some kind of operating system that runs code. So it's like, as long as there's some way to connect it to this, you don't have to redesign and implement any of this tooling architecture into new devices or into the device itself. You can just connect it to this abstraction of being able to just have an agent controller that knows how to use the tool and how to run that interface. And all you got to do is just plug it in, and you can have a much quicker adoption curve.
Yeah. And one thing that really excites me in Open Interpreter along those lines is just how widely applicable it can be, where it in it itself doesn't have to solve all of life's complex problems, but it can empower people who are working on those problems to take away a lot of the tedious work. Because if you think about researchers, doctors are another good example. The amount of administrative work that they have to do that eats into their time is significant. And if we can offload a lot of that into reliable, repeatable, automated processes, it frees up more of their time to actually like use their brain power towards solving the problems. And being able to be a catalyst towards like accelerating technological development is wonderful to be a part of. So we have our own goals and what we want to do. The fact that we can level up any type of worker who's involved with the digital realm in some way is, I think, the biggest win of it all, where you can take someone that does XYZ, and then all of a sudden they don't have to do the Z, and then they get that much more ability to focus on what really matters.
Yeah, man. It's super exciting. I'm really glad there's people like you and like Killian who sees this kind of potential and really takes action on it, because that's the biggest thing, is being able to talk about it and do a podcast about it. Like, that's super fun, but be actually taking action on it, it's hard. I mean, I'm sure you guys have had plenty of challenges, plenty of obstacles to overcome, and there's still more to be overcome. But I mean, I haven't sensed any kind of lack in determination from anybody who's been talking about this. And Killian's energy when he was on the house party was amazing. Like, he's just still so excited about it. So
can't beat it.
Yeah.
And what's really cool too with having such like an engaged cable community is it's a natural way of like recruiting and getting people on board, because you see who's actually mission driven, like who's willing to put in their time and effort to just like make this a reality. Ty got hired. He was the first hire from a hackathon. I got hired from demos I put on Twitter. The next few hires were through the O1 project. So it's like we have this non-conventional way of building the team, where it's like, who's like all in on this mission of like building a better world through technology. One of the things is like reducing human drudgery and improving the human condition through technology. So if you buy into that and you're willing to grind and put in work towards supporting open source projects, my opinion is it doesn't even have to be Open Interpreter, but if you're willing to put your time and effort into a public good that is open source code, like that shows that you're dedicated, that shows that you want to do the right thing. And then all of a sudden you have a direct interface. Like you said, like we just connected on Twitter, people connect with me on Discord. Like there's not this like corporate wall keeping like the public from the company. Like we're fully transparent in what we do, both with our code and our operations. So it's awesome being a part of this. It really is.
Yeah, man, I can tell. And I noticed you guys are hiring, right? And there's quite a few people that at least I run into that are looking for good, decent tech jobs that are actually enjoyable. So do you want to talk about just kind of what kind of people you're looking for?
The vision Killian has is to build a solid team in Seattle. Seattle's full of really good talent. The AI Tinkers community out there is probably the best in the world. Although I just spoke at the Ottawa one, and they're a contender, I think. But I am a remote employee, so it's not as though remote is not an option. But the flywheel effects you get from getting a group of people in a room together, working in the office, is beneficial. So I would say if you're like hunting to work at Open Interpreter, go to a hackathon in Seattle. Go to AI Tinkerers. Just like show us what you got. Put demos up online. We're not actively recruiting and like hunting for people, but because we found like the cream rises to the top, and it's one of those things where the people who we feel would be a good fit Open Interpreter, they become visible. Like I said, we're a very transparent company, so it really helps to be that type of person where you're, helping people out on Discord, showing off stuff on Twitter, just making yourself known, because that's really how we've become as popular as we are. It's just Killian has a incredible eye for a really strong demo, puts out to the world, and then when people try the product, it can actually do what we promised. Like before the O1 release, which was in my mind the best AI hardware device release that has happened, we regimented all the testing to make sure everything in that demo could actually be done, where even if it might take a couple tries, because like I said, LMs have natural unpredictability, everything in that demo is a capability of O1. And that was like when we first made it. We've made continuous progress. Before the launch, there'll be even more progress on both the hardware and software front. So it's like, be authentic, be legitimate, and deliver on our promises. And it's just made Open Interpreter a very desirable place.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like a fun place to work, and
great people. I love
maybe
this too.
maybe in a different life, if I was in Seattle, I'd be joining that project too, because it's crazy. Cool. Well, to close this out, Mike, I want to just ask, what's one thing that you are most excited about, looking forward to in this venture, like that you want to share with anybody who's listening? Like, what's the one thing you think you're most excited about?
I would say I have a personal mission to try to democratize the benefit of computers, where even though the barrier to entry has been reduced, there's still a lot of work to do before everyone in the world is able to benefit from technology. I have been incredibly lucky in my life where I fell into software, fell into these jobs, and it's just the amount of joy and freedom it's unlocked has been like indescribable. And I want everyone to have the same option. Even though like tech life, computer life isn't for everyone should at least have the option. And right now, the current state of computers do not allow that. There's also things like older people, blind people, people who just traditionally can't use computers in their current form. They're missing out through no fault of their own. And with this modern technology, we have the ability to close that gap and make it possible. I also am very aware that in the AI safety debate, there's a lot of people pushing for the centralization of this capability. And I view that as something that's extremely detrimental. And I think democratizing AI to as many people as possible is the solution for ensuring that like the balance of power stays consistent, that people are able to like control their own destiny. So I want to put the powers of AI into the hands of every single person that I can. If they choose to use it, great. If not, cool. But they should have the option. And having 3 or 4 very large corporations close wall everything with like extreme government regulations that don't allow other startups to flourish, I think is pretty dystopian. So I want to make sure that I put my time and effort into getting this into the hands of as many people as possible.
Man, I can't. I'm super excited. It's Open Interpreter is going to be the operating system that most of the next generation learns how to build applications on. It's going to be the foundation of a lot of really popular apps that are going to be the next Ubers, Airbnbs, those types of apps. They're going to be built on this type of natural language interface, and I can't wait. I'm super excited for you guys.
And sorry, just to interject, anyone that has a business idea that works with Open Interpreter, join our Discord or connect with me on Twitter. Like, we want to enable as many people to use this as possible. So if you have an idea and need help with like, how do I implement this? Or like, what's the best practices? Like, we are happy to share that information. We want Open Interpreter on 1 billion devices, and we are not going to do that. We need the community to do that. So we want to help you succeed. You can use this in a commercial sense. Like the O1 device is like open source for commercial use. So if you want to like make a company right now that makes O1s, have at it. Like we'll help you make it happen. Any software thing, if you want to integrate Open Interpreter to make it more intelligent, we'll help you with that. So you can join our Discord. Like you said, the house party is a lot of fun. We have one coming up. Although I think the next Thursday is July 4th, and I don't know if we're going to do it then, but there might be a special announcement on that day. And then the following month in August, we're going to be having an in-person event that will be live streamed. So people in Seattle can get excited for that. Maybe I'll even make an appearance. We'll see. But yeah,
Dude, I
just
might make
connect,
it out
reach out. We
there.
want to help you succeed.
Awesome. Dude, maybe I'll be coming out to Seattle. That sounds
Love
like
to have
fun.
you.
Dude, I'll fly out there. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, Mike, really appreciate it. If anybody wants to find you on Twitter, it's going to be Mike Bird. And if you want to find Open Interpreter on Twitter, it's just Open Interpreter, right?
Yep. Open Interpreter. I'm at Mike Bird Tech. Mike Bird was taken.
Okay. All right. Cool. And I'll have everything linked in the description as well. So appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.